Okay. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our January Rights January. Oh my goodness, our November Rights at Night session. Thank you all for being with us this evening. We're going to be talking about the state legislature. And obviously, I'm thinking ahead already to the January session, the regular session in January. Glad you are all able to join us this evening. And just to let you know, we will have time for questions. So if you want to ask a question, if you want to put it in the chat, if you don't want to be seen, or if you raise your hand, we will call on you to ask your questions. So at this time, I am going to turn us over to our Director of Government Relations, Joe Fleming. Joe?
Thank you, Lisa. I have a question for everyone on the call. Is anyone on the call an ESP? Raise your hand or raise your virtual hand. I don't see anyone. Okay.
I'm not seeing any.
So just to let everyone know, tomorrow we're doing Facebook Live also, where we will be commemorating and honoring our ESP members. It's National ESP Day. We have a proclamation from the governor, and just want to mention that. And would love to have an ESP on the call with us to talk about their experiences, perhaps during COVID or as the school year progresses. I have a PowerPoint present, which I'm going to share. And I'd kind of like to, can everybody see that okay?
Hasn't popped up yet, Joe.
Oop. Share screen. There it is. Sorry. That better?
Yes.
Right. So I'd kind of like to go this way on questions. Interrupt me if you have any questions. As we go through the legislative process in Georgia, I'd rather answer the question as we go rather than save it at the end, because sometimes when you've been doing this a long time, just like as a teacher, you begin to use jargon that only a handful of people know, or acronyms and various things like that. So I want to avoid that and be as simple as we can and answer any questions. I'm hopeful that we can kind of drill down with Lisa's help and Grace's help and your input into how the legislative process works and how you can influence it. So the obvious place for me anyway to start is, who serves in our General Assembly, and how often do they run? There are age requirements for the state Senate and for the House of Representatives and for the governor, and elections for the legislative seats, both in the Senate and the House, are every 2 years. So this coming year is an important year, 2022. There'll be elections in the new districts that are being drawn even as we speak at the General Assembly. If you don't know now, the General Assembly is in special session. They do for this purpose of redrawing lines every 10 years based on the United States Census. And the census shows areas of growth and areas when there's been diminished population. And they have to redraw the lines so that each district represents approximately the same number of people. So in this special session, both chambers have passed new House maps, and we'll have those to send out to you in the near future. Both chambers have passed new Senate maps, and again, we'll have those available for you in the future, in the near future. And those are before the governor awaiting his signature. There are going to be some changes at the General Assembly. Of course, they'll be running in these new districts come 2022. We will be losing some of our very good friends of education. in part because some are running for higher office, some are running for governor, lieutenant governor, secretary of state, superintendent of education. But we may lose some of our friends at the Capitol who have been either thrown into a district with another incumbent. For example, Rebecca Mitchell in Gwinnett County and Shelley Hutcherson in Gwinnett County currently represent two different districts, but under the new maps, they will have, if they wish to run, they'll be running against each other in the primary. And there's several examples of that across the state. There are a few instances where a Republican incumbent and a Democrat incumbent have been thrown in. Gerald Green, for example, in Cuthbert, Georgia, and Winford Dukes in Albany, Georgia, are an example where a Republican and Democrat will share the new district going forward. There are cases where, for example, in Cobb County, two Republicans have been thrown into a district, and one has already announced he's not going to seek re-election. So there's a lot to unpack from redistricting about how the new districts look, who's running. So there's a lot going on in that area that's going to impact directly our work in the coming year. Now, the next big issue for the General Assembly is the congressional maps. And those are just now beginning their way through the process. I think since Republicans control both the Georgia Senate and the Georgia House, they're probably going to try to weaken the strength of the district for Lucy McBath, for example, and possibly Carolyn Bordeaux. They may be looking for opportunities for their friends to run in more competitive districts. So that's going to be an interesting fight. And it really is probably more of a chamber versus chamber fight on congressional districting, because each of them are looking out for their own members. So we have the congressional maps to go. While we're talking about the special session, there are a few other issues that I'll mention, and then we'll get more into the legislative process. In the governor's call for a special session, there is suspension of the fuel tax that began its way through committee process today. There's the issue of Buckhead City. There's a movement, if you're not aware, to create a city of Buckhead out of the city of Atlanta. That's something that we're concerned about, particularly from an education standpoint. Lisa, I think as you've pointed out, the current constitution of the state does not permit any new school districts to be created. Yet you will have APS schools in the city of Buckhead. APS has no obligation to support those schools once they're in a different city. It would be like the people of Cobb County funding Fulton County schools. They're in different jurisdictions. Grace, you may want to just mention your conversation with State Senator Jen Jordan. I think if I heard you right, there may be, as a part of the deal, that the Buckhead City schools would become, or that the schools in the city of Buckhead would become part of the Fulton County system. Do you mind saying a few words about your conversation?
Yeah, I mean, it's all speculation at this point, but it sounds like Fulton County would subsume Buckhead City Schools if they were to become a separate entity from APS. I'm not sure how that works out for budgeting. And I think, of course, for the educators who are on the ground, they're going to want to have transparency around that issue. But it sounds like there needs to be, or that Jen Jordan will be coming out with some messaging on that. And we might be doing that as well, depending on how things go in this legislature.
So it's definitely something we have concerns about at GAE, the impact on our teachers in those schools, the students in those schools. And of course, another big issue is that when you take Buckhead out of the city of Atlanta, you're taking a major part of the property tax base, for example, sales tax base. You're right, Patrick. You're taking a lot of money out of the city of Atlanta budget as well. So that is an issue that may be resolved during this special session. There's another issue in Gwinnett County. For those of you in Gwinnett, There has been a bill introduced during the special session that would make the the Gwinnett County school board races nonpartisan, and to redraw the state school board, the system school board lines. This was done in darkness and overnight, and it surprised a lot of people, this power grab, which actually also extends to expanding the Gwinnett County Commission. It was a very partisan maneuver. It got a lot of criticism. The bill passed committee in the Senate, but just today, Clint Dixon, the only Republican senator representing Gwinnett County, indicated that the heat in the kitchen has been too much and he's going to pull back and regroup during the regular session that starts in January. So there's a lot of shenanigans and a lot of things going on there. So those are some of the other issues that we'll see addressed during this special session. Back to our elections every 2 years. November 8 is the big election day where we'll have all the statewide races up, all the legislative races, congressional races, and some local races too. The primaries are going to be May 24th. That's an important deadline for GAE because we plan to support as many of our friends, whether they're incumbents or challengers, as possible. I want to mention just briefly before we get into the meat of the legislative process, this website, and I'm going to go to it for a second. Once I move Patrick and Lisa out of the screen.
We have a question from Barbara Stringer. How are these changes being made without public input? Barbara, that's one of the reasons that they were forced to pull back and wait, because there had been no public input.
That's exactly right. Yeah. And on the redistricting portion, they did do roughly 8 field hearings, but it was before anyone could react to any concrete map. It was essentially testimony that be fair in the process. There really was no public input on the actual maps that were brought to the committee. So if you want to know who your legislator is, this is a good place to go. This is on the Secretary of State's website.
Joe, we're still seeing the PowerPoint.
Okay, hold on. Where are you?
I have that representative page up. Real quick, Joe, I just want to ask, if they redo Atlanta the way you're talking about moving the schools out of Buckhead, with the large number of charter schools, that would really harm the membership in Atlanta.
Yes, I think you're right, Patrick. I mean, it's a good point. So
because a fourth of Atlanta's schools are charters. A fourth of the children attend charter schools in Atlanta. So I just wanted to comment on that.
yeah. So can you see the MVP page, Lisa?
Now we can, yes.
Sorry. So I'm just going to type in my information here. Jay Fleming. I live in Cobb County. COB. Where are you? There you are. Roll Tide. 0663. Submit. So this is a good site to go to one, make sure you're still registered to vote, eligible to vote. This page will tell you if somehow you've been purged from the list, which is a frequent occurrence. Every so often, if you have not voted in an election, your name may be removed. But it's a good place to confirm. As you can see, I voted Eastside Baptist Church. My address is there. It's a good place to confirm they have the correct address for you. Now, it's not updated yet, but it will be once these new maps become law. But if I hit, for example, U.S. Congress District 6, it should take me to my Congressman, Lucy McBath's page. No, where did I go? So it's a good place to check. The current members of the General Assembly is not up to date. So if you clicked on your state representative, it would give you the whole list of every member of the state house. But that will be updated. It's a good way to check who your congressman is, who your legislators are. Make sure your polling location is correct, your address is correct, and that you're still in good standing and eligible to vote. Grace, are you seeing organization of the General Assembly? Great. So just a couple of notes. Georgia has one of the larger legislative bodies in the country. There are 180 members of the Georgia House. Only New Hampshire with 400. I can't even imagine how that functions. And Pennsylvania have larger ones. And then as you see, the number of Senate. And these are part-time legislators, and they're paid part-time, $17,000 a year. They do get per diem in the off season for official business like study committees and things of that nature.
Okay. We've got a couple of questions, Joe.
Sure.
Why, first question is, why doesn't the My Voter page take you directly to your representative? And you said that's because they have not updated it?
Correct.
Okay. And that's just that the Secretary of State's office has not updated it for us.
That's correct. And I talked to somebody there the other day, and after the governor signs these maps, which I'm sure he will, they tell me that will be updated. Grace also has another website that's good for checking that stuff as well. Grace, I don't know if you want to put that in the chat.
No, it's not that our state house is non-functional. It's that they have not provided the links on the Secretary of State's website, so you can easily see who your representatives are. If you go to the one that Grace just put up, that will take you to show you, based on your address, who your representatives are. And you can contact them through the House page, but you have to know who you're looking for. Right now, if you go to the House page, it's going to give you all 22.
So each chamber organizes itself. The House elects what we call a Speaker of the House. He's the #1 dude in the House. He appoints committees and committee chairmen. He determines which committees bills are referred to. And basically the lieutenant governor functions in the same manner in the Senate. He is actually elected by the people of the state. Speaker Ralston is elected by the people of his district, and then by the members of the House of Representatives. But Duncan is elected as a statewide office. As a result, according to the Georgia Constitution, he's also president of the Senate. So he appoints committees and assigns legislation. So a couple of notes. Any spending bill that you see or appropriations, any grant state money, those bills must begin in the House of Representatives. They go to committee, passed by the House, and then go to the Senate for the Senate's concurrence. General Assembly meets 40 days, 40 legislative days. They don't have to be 40 days in a row. In fact, during COVID, They met until March 15th, suspended the session and picked it up again in June. So those 40 legislative days can stretch for as long as the session takes. Generally, they're out of session in late March, early April. This year, the session begins on Monday, January 10th. It's always the second Monday in January.
So I have a question.
Sure.
When does the budget usually get passed? That's usually the first order of business, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yeah, so in Georgia, the governor is required by the Constitution to submit a budget. And that usually happens the first week of the session. Say by Wednesday or Thursday, I think we generally have an outline of what's in it. Then the governor's budget then goes to the House Appropriations Committee. And the House Appropriations Committee, members appointed by the Speaker, includes Democrats and Republicans, but there's a majority Republican on the district because they control the House, and the speakers are Republican. And then the Appropriations Committee will look at it, and they'll make changes to the governor's bill that they like. For example, one thing that occurred 2 years ago, and I'm a little concerned about this year, we had a fight 2 years ago over the teacher pay raise because the House Appropriations Committee wanted to take the money that would have been spent on teacher pay raise and use it for a reduction in state income tax. Just this week, a senator introduced a bill that would abolish the income tax. And the House has long been on record as believing that a reduction in the income tax is important. And we had to mobilize our members to contact legislators to say the teacher pay raise is a priority. The reduction in the income tax the Republicans want to make amounted to like $12 a year. It was just virtually meaningless. So I'm a little concerned about that as a priority for the House. I do believe the teacher pay raise will be in the governor's budget. But once the Appropriations Committee in the House makes their changes to it, then it is reported to the Rules Committee. Both chambers have a Rules Committee that basically regulates what bills come to the full floor for a vote and when. And if the Rules calendar schedules it, normally it will go to the floor of the House for a vote. If the House passes that, it's transmitted to the Senate, and then the Senate starts the whole process again. It goes to their committee, the Senate Finance Committee is what they call it. They have a chance to make changes to it, and then if it passes out of there, it goes to the Senate Rules Committee and to the full Senate. And we'll get into more on that in just a second. Generally, when we're looking at the committees at the House at GAE, there are a few that stand out as our major priorities because this is where most education related bills come from. The Appropriations Committee, which I just meant, they determine how much QBE is funded. They determine a whole host of public education funding measures. So that is a critical committee. You know, certainly in the last 2 years, there have been millions and millions cut from QBE and public education in the last two budgets that have passed. It is our hope that we get back to fully funding QBE this year and begin to restore some of the cuts that were just made in the last 2 years. House Education Committee, these would be issues that they discuss related to education policy. This is where bills usually go that affect waivers. And I hope you've heard us talk about the need for reform for waivers where school districts can essentially request a waiver from state law, from class size, for example. In the law, specific number of students as a maximum per classroom, easily waived by school board petitioning the state school board for a waiver, so they don't have a limit on class size. There are voucher bills that come up in waiver and education committee. There are a variety of issues that we'll be working on in the House Education Committee. In the Senate Finance is essentially their equivalent of the Appropriations Committee. Their education committee is called Education and Youth. And again, more policy-oriented type education bills introduced by senators go to that committee. If it passes House Education in the House, it would normally go to the Senate Youth Education and Youth Committee. And then both each chamber of the Senate and the House have retirement committees where legislation affecting PERS or TRS would normally be referred to. And I say normally because every once in a while there's an exception where one of our bills gets introduced to the Judiciary Committee. Usually it happens when the sponsor and the speaker don't think they have the votes in the usual committee, and they'll send it to a committee that they think is more favorable. We've had, I think we had a voucher bill a couple of years ago to go to the Judiciary Committee. So you really have to watch the whole calendar, but those are the primary committees that we definitely check in with every day. So if you're at home and you want to follow legislation, and Grace, we find the link to the GAE bill tracker page.
Sure will.
Thank you. Technology has really improved in this area, and it's actually fairly easy to follow legislation there. In a moment, Grace is going to post a link to our bill watch page, if you will, the bills that we're tracking. And you can check in with that, and it's updated every day during the session. Another way is to go to the Georgia General Assembly website. You can check the calendar. For example, this, if you can see it down here, is today's calendar. The Rules Committee was on video that you can watch live, or you can go back and watch it later if you missed it. There was a meeting of the Insurance Committee that it was also broadcast. And there's also an agenda over here as well. So using the information that GAE provides you in the form of legislative updates through the bill tracking page that Grace has done a great job with, and other communication from GAE, and then on your own, you can follow those things. So when education comes up and there's a hearing, they're always broadcast in both chambers. And you can watch that live or again in person. We're told that there will be an education meeting in the House, but it has not been scheduled yet. So that may or may not happen. But if you go to the main page of the Georgia General Assembly, which is right here. So let me back up a second. You guys seeing this okay? So the General Assembly website is www.legis.ga.gov. And that's the portal to the Georgia General Assembly. And there's a wealth of information on here. The first thing you see is the calendar for the day. And again, for today, we had a Rules Committee in the Senate. Looks like they had another one that's to be announced on the 17th, tomorrow. The Special Committee on Access to Civil Justice is meeting. You can watch the floor debate if you want. Reapportionment meeting, you can watch that. And if I click all of them, it'll give you everything that's scheduled for the next period of time. So this goes page 2. So this goes to next Friday. And what we learned from this is that at least the Senate expects to be in at least until this Friday. The other thing I want to point out while we're here, this box. Again, this is on the main page, this bar here, legislation and laws, all legislation. You can see what bills have been introduced for this special session. If we want to go to the regular session for bills this earlier this year and next year, we can look at that. If I know the bill number, I can type it in here. I know that there's a bill, House Bill 60, which I know is a voucher bill rather. And if you type that in, you can see the bill status and information here. So
Withdrawn.
What's that?
Withdrawn, thanks to GAE members.
Yeah. So in the current version, obviously there, you can see how it's evolved. Sponsors Wes Cantrell. These are the other members that sponsored it. There's Casey Carpenter or Grace. I guess we can take him off the list. So if we hit current version, that's the latest version that passed a committee. This is a voucher bill that came up this year. It was one of what did we decide, Grace? 5 voucher bills this year?
There were 4.
4.
4. And it's one that we beat back. It actually went to Education Committee, passed Education. Where does it go next? It goes to the Rules Committee to determine if and when it goes to the floor. 3 times the Rules Committee said, yes, we're sending this to the floor. 3 times it was sent back to Rules Committee because they didn't have the votes. And they didn't have the votes because of GAE members calling, emailing, and letting their legislators know this is a bad bill.
Okay, Joe,
Yes, ma'am.
I want to stop you for just a second because I know this is something people don't really understand. Okay, so the Rules Committee isn't about rules. They set the agenda.
That's right.
Okay, and then once they set the agenda, how do we know? So if Rules passes it and says it's going to the floor, how do we know when that's going to happen? Do they like go in order or?
Okay, so
Yeah.
the Senate usually does go in order, but that's not always true. And there's no rule that binds them to that order. So in the case of HB 60, again, passed Education Committee, went to Rules. It and say on that particular day, 10 other bills were brought to Rules Committee and were put on the floor calendar. It really is at the discretion of the speaker to determine the order that they would come up. And ultimately, it's up to the speaker to decide if they do come to the floor. So once the Rules Committee said, yeah, put this voucher bill on the floor, the speaker, as the vote was coming up, was like, he has what we call a whip. And a whip is a person for his or her particular party that counts the votes to make sure they're there. And when the whip counted the votes to determine if there were enough votes to pass HB 60, the voucher bill, he reported back to the speaker, no, we do not have the votes. And at that point, the speaker said, we're not holding a vote on this today. Go back and try to get the votes. And that's what happened 3 times on HB 60. It was calendared by the Rules Committee. Ultimately, the speaker made the decision to send it back to Rules Committee because they didn't have the votes. Yeah, it's a little confusing. The name Rules does kind of, but yeah, you're right. It's kind of the gatekeeper committee. Like I said, determines what bills and when go to the floor.
Okay, so they don't have to go in order.
No.
It can be anytime. Okay, next question. So if it is on the calendar, it goes to the floor Wednesday
Mhm.
and doesn't get called, can it be called then Thursday
Yes, it
or
can.
Friday?
Yes,
Okay,
it can. So normally what you'll see after a Rules Committee meets for a day is there is a list produced of the bills that Rules said thumbs up to. And they're in an order, but again, that order does not have to be followed.
Okay.
All right, so we talked a little bit about how you can kind of follow at home. I pointed out legislation. So this, again, it's when you hit the Georgia General Assembly website, this is what you see, and you've got an option to check legislation. You can even keyword type. So if you want to know bills about teacher salaries, you could type in teacher salary. You can use keywords like that to find legislation. If you follow what the communications we put out, you'll know some of the key bill numbers. If you hit House of Representatives, it'll tell you the committees in the House, the members of the House, same for the Senate. So it's a pretty useful page to get to know. So here's the whole process in a nutshell. And I'm gonna, oops, sorry. I thought I had a link on this. Oh, I did. Open. Share.
we're seeing how a bill is passed.
Yeah, you seen that?
Mhm.
I'm gonna zoom in a little bit. It's a little blurry, but this just got, and this is in the next No magazine, by the way.
The No magazine that everybody should have in their inbox right now, Joe.
Oh, excellent, great. So, you know, people ask how a bill becomes law. It all starts with an idea. A surprising number of bills come from constituents. I think we should have a park, a new state park in this area, or I want to change the procedures for the approval of new textbooks. Or a legislator sees a problem and has an idea. So they'll gather the information, perhaps it comes from you. GAE had a couple of bills introduced last year that were ideas that we worked with legislators to get introduced. Probably my favorite is Senator Jen Jones' constitutional amendment to replace the word adequate in the Constitution of Georgia when describing funding for education, or to provide an adequate education and change it to a quality education. It was just an idea from sitting around and talking with her and amongst ourselves. So the ideas come from a variety of places. A legislator wants to pursue that as a bill, will kind of gather all the information and facts, and he'll go to the lawyers of the chamber, which is generally called legislative counsel. And legislative counsel will write a bill so that it's consistent with the other parts of the part of the state law that it's seeking to amend or expand. And that's how a bill becomes law. And then that bill, if the legislator likes it, he'll introduce it, and it begins to get referred to committee by the lieutenant governor or the speaker. So number 2 shows you kind of the legislative council part. The bill is filed. And then if we go down, straight down, we talked about the committee process. So you've gone from just an idea to, with the lawyers' help, getting it, make sure its language is consistent with other definitions in the law, to being introduced and filed with the clerk of the House or the secretary of the Senate. And then it's referred to committee by the speaker or lieutenant governor. The committee can have a hearing on it if it chooses. Not all bills make it for a hearing. There are many every year that are introduced but never there's never a committee hearing held on it. And this is where you guys and others in the state who are engaged in the political process can make a big difference. Your voice to say, we demand or we want this bill to be heard, it's important to us, or we hate this bill, it's going to mess up our lives and we don't want it to move forward. That makes a difference. Volume, quantity, and quality of communications. Assuming that it does get a hearing, it'll be heard in committee, there'll be a vote taken by the committee. If it's passed out, it goes to that rules committee that we talked about, one in each chamber. And if it passes rules, it will go to the floor for a vote. There's debate on the floor. Senators for, against it, House members for and against it get to speak on it. And sometimes it's pretty fiery speeches from both sides on different issues. But if after debate, a vote is held and it passes, it goes over to the other chamber. So if it passes the House, it goes to the Senate. If it passes the Senate, it goes to the House, and the whole process starts over again. It goes to the other chamber's pertinent committee. Usually if it goes from education, for example, it'll go to education in the Senate and vice versa. So it starts the process all over again in the other chamber. And doesn't have to be brought up for a hearing, but if it does get a hearing and a vote and it passes out, it goes to that chamber's rules committee. And then if it goes to the floor of the other chamber and it passes, if there are no changes or no differences between the Senate and House bill, then it goes to the governor for his consideration, where he can veto the bill or let it become law or sign it into law. There are times when you have very similar pieces of legislation, one passed by the Senate and one passed the House, but they're not identical. Often you'll have what we call a conference committee. That is, the Speaker of the House and the Lieutenant Governor appoint usually 3 members of each of their chambers to meet and try to resolve the differences. If that conference committee can come to an agreement on a bill, then that bill goes back to both chambers for a vote. If they can't come to an agreement and neither side is willing to give in, essentially the bill dies. So conference committees usually happen at the very end of the session and right before crossover day. Crossover day is the day where a bill has to pass the chamber in which it was introduced to be eligible for further consideration. I wouldn't worry about it too much, because while technically the bill bill number may not move forward, the concept of that bill could easily find its way into another piece of legislation. All right. Just a note, you may be wondering, well, if I do all these things and I contact legislators, am I a lobbyist? You don't have to register unless you're compensated $10,000 more to influence legislation. So acting as a GA member and acting as a concerned educator, there's no need to lobby. No need to register as a lobbyist. You're doing your duty as a public citizen. A couple of notes we talk about all the time. We hope you'll come down to the Capitol. Our day at the Capitol is coming up, and we'll talk about that in just a second. But in your communications with legislators, whether by phone, email, or in person, it's always important to be knowledgeable, to do your research. Hopefully we do our job in arming you with the talking points you'll need. But think of it as being an educator, as a teacher, that you're dealing with a legislator who is part-time, who is, excuse me, not an expert in all the issues that come before the legislature. They're expected to be experts on transportation and wildlife management and taxation and workers' comp. and education, and they can't be all those things. So they're looking to you to help them understand an issue in a accurate, honest, but understandable way. So be a friendly teacher. You want to be honest and genuine, be yourself. You want to condense your talking points down to the essentials. Think of it, if you're on an elevator and you've got 20 stories to share with the legislator in that elevator, what are the key points you would point out there? A couple things: don't beg, don't threaten. I see it happen all the time. We think we're right on all things that we believe in, but you want to be respectful in the process. Lisa, I have a slide for you.
Okay, before we get to that, we do have somebody who has a question. It's iPhone. Yes.
Hey, Joe, this is Linda. Hey, everybody. Mentioning going to the Capitol. As you know, the state Capitol now has a barricade surrounding the entire building, and the retired are concerned that they obstruct our ability to get into the Capitol. I haven't gone down yet to do just a walk around, but if we wanted to pose an issue about easy or convenient access for seniors, what would be, I guess to you and Lisa both, what would be our best recourse to address that issue?
Well, somebody needs to be muted.
I got it.
Linda, there is wheelchair access available at the Capitol. They've really narrowed. There used to be 6 different ways to enter the Capitol. Now there's 2. One of them involves a very long staircase facing west. On the east side, on the south side, which faces Coverdale, there is a wheelchair accessible entry there. The gates are normally open. They built a pretty imposing fence around the Capitol, but at least when they're in session, they're open. I've never seen them not open. But I actually took a mental note the other day to notice the ADA compliance there. I can draw a map for you, but there is a way to get in wheelchair accessible. Now, getting to there does require, so parking's never easy at the Capitol when they're in session. Getting from the parking spot to the Capitol could be a little more challenging.
And I think, Joe, that's what people are thinking of, the fact that there is no ready access from parking to the Capitol. And now if you park in those places where you would have parked before, it is quite a distance because everyone is going to be entering in one place.
Yeah.
On I think that's the south side on Coverdale, across from the Coverdale office.
I have not seen anyone be able to be dropped off there that wasn't an elected official, but I will check on that and see what accommodations, if any, they make for drop off.
That would be so helpful because we were thinking of how would we get our seniors there on the GAE retired day at the Capitol. Mm-hmm. And it would be so helpful if seniors were allowed to be dropped off at the most convenient entrance. I don't want to make a big issue about it, but it seems as if not just say seniors, but those with disabilities who are on walkers.
Yeah,
I think it's a very insensitive construction that only one area would be available. I don't know. I don't know. I don't like the barricade at all, the wall, or whatever that is, they call it.
No,
I don't know, but I understand the politics behind it, but it might be a good senior issue that we have
Yeah,
regarding access. I would like to see us be able to come down Trinity. That's not Trinity, whatever street that is, from the Coverdale building, just to be dropped off.
Mitchell.
Yeah, Mitchell, to be dropped off. If we use Uber,
Yeah.
that was a way to drop
Well-
off seniors. I don't think we'd be asking too much.
So there are school buses that come down and park or drop off between the Capitol and Central Presbyterian. And then at the end of the road, separating Coverdale and the Capitol, which is blocked off, as you know, there probably is space there to drop off, which puts you at the very corner of the Capitol. But let's talk about this and we'll see if we can get something worked out.
Okay, thank you, Joe.
So Joe gave me a slide for the legislative contact team, and this is my chance to speak to those of you who are with us this evening and ask you to join our legislative contact team. And actually, probably I'm going to say that if you are here and you haven't sent us an email that you want to join the legislative contact team, we're going to probably send you an email saying we have added you to our contact team. Because we hear time and time and time again, legislators say, well, my grandmother was a teacher, my great aunt was a teacher, and so they feel like they know what's happening in the classroom today because they know someone who was a teacher 10 years ago, even 5 years ago. And I think as educators, you all know more than anyone that what's happening in our classrooms right now, people who were a teacher 5 years ago did not experience. So we want every legislator in our state to have a GAE member who they know this person is an educator, they know they are a GAE member, and they know this person will know our positions and why we have those positions for the bills that they are being asked to vote on. So I'm asking everyone to join. And while we're doing that, if you are on the call tonight, I'm going to just assume that you're here and you're interested in this, that you would like to work with us on that. And then when you get the email, and if that's not where you are, then please let us know. The other thing I want to share with you is our GAE legislative priorities. And I don't know how I shared the wrong one, but I will get it. And I want to explain to everyone how our legislative priorities come about. And I know that's small for you to see. It is in your current No magazine. So our legislative priorities are voted on each year at our representative assembly. So if you are a newer member, each year in the spring, typically in April, this year it's April 29th to May 1st, members from around Georgia who have been elected by their local come to the representative assembly. And at the representative assembly this year, you're going to elect officers for the next 2 years. We also adopt our budget. We pass resolutions, which are our belief statements, and we pass our legislative priorities. We do have a legislative committee who will put forth the proposed priorities, but at our representative assembly, any delegate who has been elected to represent their local members has the opportunity to put forth an amendment to our legislative priorities. And then, just like in the legislature, we debate and we vote, and majority rules. So you will see at the top of our legislative priorities is improving salary significantly. Then we have items to enhance education programs, to support educators, to protect educators, and to strengthen educators. So all of those are there, and they came from our members. And each year, so if you have something that when you're reading your No magazine later this week or next week, when you're having some off time, if you think of something that you think should be in our priorities that is not, send an email to us, and then we will pass that along to the legislative committee so they can add that. And the committee will be looking at some more comprehensive changes after the session so that next year we will have our priorities based on what actually happens during the legislature. So I'll stop sharing, Joe, and let you share again. That's my commercial for the legislative contact team and our legislative priorities.
I am almost done. Actually, I only have two other things. You see my day at the Capitol?
Yes, yes, yes.
So I just want to mention this. This is our annual day at the Capitol, February 24th. It'll run from 8 to 2 usually, or 3-ish. This is a critical event in the life of GAE because it brings our members face to face with legislators. I'm hopeful that we're at a point in February that we will safely be able to visit with legislators on the ropes, as we call it, the stanchion outside the chambers, in their offices, and around. But we'll have to make that call as we get closer. But we're planning on in person. So I want to make sure you put that on your calendars now. We need as big a show of force as we can get. We've got a lot of issues this year that are going to be flying around. There's a real effort at the Capitol to punch public education in the gut, financially, prohibiting mask mandates, all sorts of things. It's going to be a really difficult year. Plus, we'll have vouchers to fight again. Plus, we have a proactive agenda. But if you could come down and be a part of that, I'd love to have the biggest crowd we've ever had there. So please put it on your calendar. And then the last thing I just want to mention is Monday, we're doing a very special town hall meeting with United States Congressman Carolyn Bordeaux. She represents Forsyth County and Gwinnett County in the U.S. Congress. It'll be a good time to hear from her, but also to ask her questions. And we're encouraging our members to send questions to be asked to Congresswoman Bordeaux. You have a moment, jot those down and send it to GR, it stands for Government Relations, gr@gae.org. But that'll be an exciting event. And we're looking forward to doing one with Lucy McBath in the future, Senator Warnock, and others. And that's everything I got.
Okay, Joe, the question was asked about our day at the Capitol. It is not President's Day. It is, but I think it's that week. It's on Thursday.
Thursday, 24th. I don't know. I have to look it up.
I think President's Day is that Monday. So we will be sharing the information. It is in your No magazine. We'll also be sharing it on social media, and we will definitely be sharing the information about the town hall with Congressman Bordeaux on social media. And we will have the opportunity for members to ask questions. So if you have a question, please let us know so we can make sure that our members' concerns are heard. If you you should have received your No magazine in your email. If you did not, first we need to check and make sure your email is correct in our membership database. So I'm going to put an email in the chat to send them your correct email address, but you can also find our No magazine on the website. And I see the question, can we remind us how to get things on the list for the RA, like the windfall elimination? Okay. And the other one that are for ex-retirees, which is the government pension offset. Those are both federal legislation, and they are included in the NEA priorities. And I will tell you, however, we do have a group of GAE that will be group of GAE members that are going to be working on that with our congressman. Hopefully, I know our retired have already started working on that, but we are going to have a group working with that. Tony, you have a question?
Yeah, I'm concerned about this legislation that was dropped and then withdrawn from Gwinnett County. Clint Dixon is going to bring that back. Now, I'm not his constituent. How can I effectively reach out to him and let him know my concerns? Do I just do it as a concerned citizen? I live way in Newton County, and so I don't think he's going to care about what I think about this legislation, but the piece he dropped also included a ban on CRT, which is not taught in K-12 public schools, but could have repercussions on how teachers teach authentic history, and a ban on comprehensive sex education, which is catastrophic. That's horrible. So how can we effectively reach out to him?
Tony, I think we reach out to him, but I think we also reach out. I do live in Gwinnett County, but we all reach out to our legislators, because what is going to happen is every legislator is going to have a vote when it comes to the floor. So, and I believe that's why he pulled back on it now, because they did not follow the rules. They did not take it through the Gwinnett delegation as it was supposed to. So that's part of the issue, that it go through the rules and that it follow the process as it was intended. But I think we all reach out to our individual legislators and say, I'm upset that this did not follow the rules and that one person is trying to make policy for everyone. And normally when one person's trying to make policy for everyone, it starts at that process at the beginning, and it goes through the committee process. And if it's local language, it goes through the local. So obviously he tried to put a whole bunch of stuff in there that should not have been in local anyway. Someone asked how we know who our legislators are. And isn't it in limbo? Okay, here's the thing. We know who our legislator is for the 2022 session. Those are the people we elected in 2020. And if you go to the website, Grace, can you give us that website again? The open states where we can find our legislators. There you will find who your current legislator is. And they will be your legislator through the 2022 session. Then when you go vote, however, in May of 2022, that person may not be on your ballot. That district may not be your district number anymore because of the new lines. And hopefully one of those will be there. And no, it is available. There are several different websites that show you how to find your legislator and help you find your legislator. But right now, the way it's set up through the Secretary of State website, it just gives you all of them. And I'm not going to make any more comment on that. I do need to mention, somebody asked me, how can they sign up somebody to join GAE? It is simple. It's easy. I put it in the chat. I'm going to put it in again. Join GAE.org. Anyone can sign up 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And if you need an actual paper application, I'm going to put my contact information there. Let me know and we will make sure you get one. One thing I have told people, if you do have a paper one, don't snail mail it to us. Snail mail is slow. Scan it or take a picture and email it. And there's the information. Do we have any other questions this evening? We are right. Ooh, we've gone over. Any other questions? If not, I will thank everyone for being with us this evening. I will let you know that we will, I will send you an email once the recording is up. If you want to go back and look at something again, if you have a colleague that you want to show that information to. And I will also include the links that we gave you in the chat tonight in that email. It will probably be Friday or Monday, however, because it takes some time for the recording to go through the process and then for it to be uploaded. Thank you everyone for being with us this evening, and you all have a great evening.
You too.